Hello and welcome to Beyond the Scan. This is going to be a really informative webinar for any facilitator, therapist, practitioner, whether you're in the wellness or holistic lifestyle coaching, kinesiology, Reiki, and even in therapeutic practices such as naturopathy and nutrition. I'm wanting to show how, as a facilitator, I've come to utilize the tool, the AO scan, as an integration tool, and how this particular tool can support us in sessions, out of sessions, and in between sessions. So, before we go any further, I'll just introduce myself for those that may come across our recording or you've been shared this recording. My name is Deb. I'm the founder of Soul Roots Journey. And within my practice, we're always looking at whole body approach to wellness, looking at not the symptoms, but looking at the connections between the body, the emotions, the nervous system, the subconscious patterns, and how even the environment that we're in plays a really key role or part in our health and well-being. So, as a certified psych nutrition coach, I also am a natural perfumerer. I am a root cause, which is like regression therapy therapist and embodied processing practitioner. So we're looking in the somatic lens with my functional meditation background and also my own personal modality, embodied acupoint integration. So I bring all these modalities together so that I can understand and look at my clients as a whole, and just especially when I'm working with somatic therapy, subconscious pattern work, and sensory approaches. And a key part, and what I like to support my clients is with frequency therapy. Now, before we go into what is the AO scan and ins and outs, I'm just going to put a little disclaimer up. You can obviously read ahead, but I will just highlight that the AO scan system is related, and its related services are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or medical condition. So the product is not a medical device, it's an educational tool and should be considered as not as a substitute for professional medical advice or diagnostic or treatment, and always seek the advice of a licensed healthcare provider for any of your medical concerns. And just going back to that slide there, just really highlighting that the AO system is based upon the principles of energy, frequency, and information field. So, before we look at how we can utilize in all different modalities, all different therapies, this tool, I want to touch upon the core why this webinar particularly came about. Because one thing we all have in common as therapists is that there is a journey that our clients take. And the journey in their life and the journey in the session that they have with us. So, what we're wanting to really focus on is what do we do before a session, or what do we do during the session, and what do we do between the session? And every modality has these phases, but they're not only free phases for our clients. What are we doing in these free phases for ourselves? So, just to give a little example of what particularly I personally do before a session is it's all about preparation. So, intention setting is really paramount for this, for any session that we do with any of our clients. We might look at grounding, that might be a thing that we do to regulate ourselves. We might have other regulation techniques that we do prior to going in between sessions, or jumping from our own life and getting prepared to hold that space for someone else. You know, another thing is being curious, like setting the intention of being curious and, ensuring that I'm going to be present and always have compassion for my clients. So I know that these are things that you probably all do, but I think particularly within the medical therapeutic practices, scopes, like say in nutrition and naturopathy, um, these can be quite overlooked actually, because they might consider before session is more about reading through clients' notes, like re-looking at tests, etc., not realizing what our intention is just as paramount, and how we are showing up and getting ourselves ready to show up for a client is really conducive to how that overall session is. And so I'm just going to reiterate this about the power of setting intention. And if we think about it, it's about just having a thought in our mind of, I intend to be fully present, or I release the need to fix, or I wish to remain curious, or I honor the wisdom of this person's body. These are little simple phrases, but we're setting an intention. And within intention is carrying forward information. Now, often this is something that, again, we may in certain like energy work, Reiki, and kinesiology, we're very familiar with. If you're a therapist in that space or in some other somatic work, we're very aware of, what our energy is like and how we're showing up in session. So, with this, if we were to look without the use of a tool or a device, what things do we put in place? Are we doing any preparation prior to a session to clear, particularly if there are things that are going on in our own life, or what are we recommending our clients do prior to coming into a session with us if they've got a lot going on, so that they can come with a clear mind and being prepared and open for the session they're about to have with us. So from a facilitator point of view, again, we mentioned about grounding. If you do embodiment, somatic therapies, perhaps like boundary work, if you're into energy, Reiki, or meridians, or etc. And breath work, or as a Christian coach, prayer is a very important tool that I like to use in regards to supporting my energy. Now, we're going to look at it from another flip side. What are we doing to protect our energy? So rather than clearing what that energy is, what are we doing to ensure that we're creating healthy boundaries, that we're able to maintain that presentness and self-awareness and confidence even, and how we hold that space for our clients? What are we doing in regards to that? And that's something to think about. So finally, what is AO? I can tell you that AO is not a therapy, and AO is not a diagnosis, and AO is not the healer. What AO provides is another lens that may help us. So the best way to look at this is, you've probably been working at something, or you're looking at clients' paperwork or their blood results, and you're going, what am I missing here? And you've been staring at it forever, and it's almost like you will say to yourself, I just need a set of fresh eyes, or you're just wanting a different opinion or advice, or you're going to a resource book and going, oh, maybe there's some other causes, maybe there's some other reasoning. And so what AO can do is it can increase awareness, and it can really help reinforce change and personalize support, and above all, encourage client engagement. So here we are. We're just having a little look at AO scan. This is on the screen here. Is just a little screenshot of what we call our inner voice scan here. But there are multiple different scans that you can do within AO scan. Like you could do a quick scan. We've got the inner voice and the mind sync, which we'll definitely be looking at today. But there's obviously for naturopathy and nutrition, there's comprehensive and body systems and vital ones, which are really powerful. But the other ones we'd be looking at is the Cephi scan. But we're not going into the functionality of these scans. And I know just looking at that, that might seem, oh, this is a lot to process or this is a lot to take in. But I'm really wanting to simplify how you might only just utilize one of these scans in your actual practice. It might be that you might use these other things for your own lifestyle and well-being. So going back to originally the why behind this session, it's about how are we as facilitators, or how can we see the benefit or the use of AO scan as part of as being a tool in our practice. And we're wanting to look again at the ways that this scan can help before, during, and between sessions. I'm just wanting
So
to
we were just
talk
speaking
about
about
clearing
for
our
a
energy.
session,
So
what
we're
we can
cycling
do
back,
with
just
our
going,
AO
okay, we
scan.
know some things that we
It's all
may or may
about
not
how we
do,
can
but we could
clear the
do
energy before we're
to
holding
support us
space.
clearing the
So there's
energy.
two
And if you're
particular
thinking of clearing, it's about
scans
clearing what we
and
carry.
frequencies that we
And
can
remember,
do
shielding, like
prior to going
protecting
into a
that
session
boundary,
with a
and how
client.
we can
And it
also
could
enter
be
a
for the
session
first one, particularly, we're doing it
intentionally.
in
So
regards
what I'm
to
going to do is
when
I'm
we've
just going
had
to
one
play a
session
little
and then we're
video that I've
jumping
done,
straight
and this
into
is giving
another
you a
session.
little
So we're
bit of an
wanting to
insight
clear
into the
what's
scan
carried
itself,
from
but
the
primarily
session before, or
about
perhaps,
before
we're
session
about to
and
have a
how
session
we
with a
can
client
clear
and there's a
and
lot of things
shield
going on
not
in our
only
own
our
energy
clients, but
terrain or in our own
ourselves.
life. And we're wanting to clear that and not take that into our sessions with our clients. So we would run what we call a clearing session. And I'm just going to show you on here, we go down to energetic boosts and auras, and here you will see clearing. And when we press that, it literally goes for about 30 seconds, which I'll do in a moment. But if you see up the top, it's showing my profile here. So say, for instance, another way that you could utilize this is a client comes into session and they're overwhelmed already, like they're carrying what they've already got into session. And this is a good way of like, let's restart, let's calibrate, let's clear this energy prior to having a session. So we could then go into their profile and at the commencement of the session, run the clearing. So we would just press that and it will do a unique frequency sound for a duration of 30 seconds, which is all specific to the person's profile that happens to be up. So if we were to do this for ourselves as facilitators, we would do this under our own profile prior to a session. Now, like I said, it's very quick and easy, so it's a good thing to do just prior to going in and almost at the same time that you're setting your intention. Now, the other thing that we really want to look at is shielding. Now, shielding is amazing because we want to do that once we've done the clearing, because particularly if we're going into a session where we know that things will come up in session that either will trigger us. Maybe we know some clients tend to trigger, or their energy after a session, it takes a lot from us, or we might having to deliver some news or really support them in a challenging time, but we're wanting to protect our own like energy. And this is where we would then do the shielding so that we're getting that support. It's like a invisible armor, so to speak, so that whilst we're holding space for others, particularly in the trauma informed, or if you're doing emotional well-being or working with clients with sensitivities. This is such a valuable tool that we can do before session, is just clicking and doing these quick scans. I'm just wanting to talk about for a session what we can do with our AO scan. It's all about how we can clear the energy before we're holding space. So there's two particular scans and frequencies that we can do prior to going into a session with a client. And it could be, for the first one particularly, we're doing it in regards to when we've had one session and then we're jumping straight into another session. So we're wanting to clear what's carried from the session before, or perhaps, you know, we're about to have a session with a client and there's a lot of things going on in our own energy terrain or in our own life. So, with that in mind, we're thinking about, and with this life jacket that you can see here, you always when on a plane, they always telling you, put the life jacket on you first. And even as a parent or a carer, we know how much, or we should be more aware of how important it is that we're putting on that life jacket on us first so that we can then better equip and better support others. And so scanning ourselves is allowing us to identify areas where our own energy may feel out of balance, or we might notice a bit more that there is something that we're carrying, or it's helping us create space to reset before going into a session. Now, there is other programs that we can do that can help with clearing and resetting, and they can be like, your chakras or your meridians. And Steffi is such a valuable scanner, which, you can either broadcast or imprint frequencies, and you can create playlists. You can actually imprint into, if you make remedies or homeopathics, etc. But one thing we're going to really look at is the Cephi frequency cleanse. Okay, so we're wanting to look at a different layer of how we can cleanse or do a frequency cleanse, and that's through Cephi. Now, if we just go back one and we go to Cephi, this is Cephi here, and you'll see that it's got a raise. We're really wanting to erase prior to imparting frequency there. But if we go down further, what I'm wanting you to do, if you have an AO scan, is we're wanting to look at down the bottom here, this frequency cleanse. And I love the look of it. It looks like a shower, like it's washing all over us. So this particular cleanse is like, what does this person need support with right now? And what frequency pathways might complement the work we are doing with the client? And this can be done in session or out of session. So what we could see for in session is if you're a person who supports people through meridian techniques, we can support through meridians, or especially with chakra support, a lot of Reiki, kinesiology, a lot of different practitioners or facilitators or therapists may want to work with particular chakra support. And this is really integral when we're listening to those cues that client says, like they're sounding like they're disconnected, they have trouble grounding, they may feel emotional overload, or they might have difficulty expressing themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at what frequency support that they may like. The other way that we can particularly do this, and this is really powerful in integration work, we're wanting to help the client when they're trying to process something emotionally or somatically. And it could be in the session, or like that we're doing as part of the integration outside of the session, which leads to how we can make an at-home frequency plan, so that they're getting that additional cleansing, that additional support, in, you know, out of session as well. So, for example, we may look at doing more morning, like a restorative one, and during the day we can do some emotional support, and evening some calming. And then we can teach our clients on how to inquire, like what do we notice, what feels different, etc. So going to this scan, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of it. You'll see here it's got broadcast, continuous, and binaural mode. That's if you've got those special headphones. I forget what they're called at the moment. Um, it's where the vibration comes through the headphones. It's lost me for a moment, but literally you can click that on. So then it's giving you different frequencies coming through, separate ears, and joining at the crown of the head. Now, when we go to this, we can broadcast it. So we can send this information out into their information field, or we can imprint it. So if you're a person who is a practitioner who makes herbal tonics, homeopathic remedies, etc., you can imprint then the frequency into the actual product that you've got there. And we've got time durations that we can select for that. But if we look down below here, you'll see the different noises that we get. And, you know, a lot of us are already familiar with white noise, but, you know, we can do sweeps. They're really good restorative reset sweeps. And you got your pink noise and your purple noise. The purple is really good for focus. Like if your person, you know, has lost their spark for creativity, or they need some attention, some motivation, that would be a really good one to do. Now, when we look down even further, what we're going to see is we can actually go through the chakras here, and there's select soft gelio. I can never say that word properly, frequencies for that. So if I was to click on the root chakra here, this supports people who need overcoming guilt and fear, and one that carries negative beliefs. So it really gives you a lot of information, so you're not alone and not trying to do the guesswork yourself as to which frequency, you know, this is for physical pain, etc. So we can really tailor the level of cleansing, the level of integrational therapy that we can offer to our clients. Okay, so we're wanting, so what about during session, and how can AO support? So AO can be like an assessment companion, you know, because we can track patterns. We can look at asking better questions. So when we're getting these reports, and you've got to be mindful that energy is forever moving and flowing. So it's really good when we're actually seeing over a period of time and noticing trends and recognizing that. Or, you know, when we've done a scan with a client, then we might have better embodied inquiry questions, or asking more questions that we may not have thought about prior to a session, and noticing themes. So we're going to just now look at one of my favorites, and something that I use in practice is the AO Mind Sync. And before we do that, I am just going to, on this screen, you will see there's various different modalities and the ways that we can use that, but we'll go through that
So we're
with
going to
our
discuss
demonstration.
how in
So Mind
session
Sync can be
and
done in
out of
session,
session,
after
how we can
session, every
incorporate
day, and
AO's
not only for
mind
our clients
sync
but for ourselves. It's
application for
helping
various
facilitate
different
the
ways
shift.
that we as
And MindSync is
facilitators
really
in
involved with
our
neuroplasticity
modality
and,
or our
you know,
therapy
subconscious
offer therapeutic
programming.
practice
So for
which
me, as
can
someone who works with
amplify and
belief work
support
and
what
regression
we
or
do with a
subconscious work,
client.
this is a
So,
powerful
AO
tool, but it
Mindset
is
is a
such a powerful
dynamic
tool for
affirmation
any coach or any
reprogramming tool,
therapist.
and it's using the client's own voice through binaural process. So, what you do when you actually come on here is you would have an intention or an affirmation that you would have with the client. Now, what I've actually shown is like from a nutrition or naturopath, you might have a client who needs to reduce sugar, or you might have a client who needs to increase their water intake. So, if you're setting an affirmation or an intention around their need, you would get them to record that so that then when they hear those frequencies, when they hear their voice, their subconscious and the patterning within is giving them new choices and options to work with. And it's complementing and it's integrating what you're facilitating. Similar to with energy work, and those with Reiki or kinesiology, this would be the same, especially when we're looking at different things. And then, like myself, who does regression work, subconscious work, belief work, or life coaching, where we utilize intentions and affirmations within our practice, this is a way that we, rather than saying, hey, write it on a piece of paper, and absorb it that way, we're really going into neuroplasticity. We're really going into the subconscious and really supporting that affirmation. So what's really cool here is you can actually import a track here. You've basically, so if we were to scan at the moment, and I'm just going to scan. Okay, so it's letting me know here after I've scanned, if I click this, what do I want? Do I want an affirmation in self-confidence? So you can do ones that are already pre-selected, but I personally, as a facilitator, like to utilize intentions and affirmations that I have custom created, especially as an embodied acupoint technique. I'm giving clients tapping scripts, so this is another way that we can utilize the tapping scripts in the recording of that. So we've got those here, which you can see. You can change the volume and the tone, and then you simply play it. Now, how does the client get this? You'll see the little envelope, so you can then email it to them. So every night as they're going into bed, they can actually play this, or if there's times of various needs where they can also play it on any occasion that they would like. So we're going to discuss how in session and out of session, how we can incorporate AO's MindSync application for various different ways that we as facilitators in our modality or our therapy or therapeutic practice, which can amplify and support what we do with a client. So AO.
So you can actually see how useful that this particular scan alone can support all these different types of modalities. Now we're going to just now go to a particular scan option,
Now, I'm
which is
really
a
excited
key
to
one
share
on the
this
AO
particular
device
scan
or
option. It was
interface,
the first
and
one that
it's
I
called the inner
personally was
voice. It's
introduced
about
to,
whole body
and it
inquiry,
was
and I
why I felt
absolutely love this one
empowered and
because
thought this
it's
is such a
actually
valuable tool
working
for
out from the
facilitators and
pitch, the tone
practitioners.
of a voice.
So,
It
most
will be able
who
to
have maybe followed
recognize
me
a
know
lot
that
of
I look
insight
at
into
wellness
your
from a
inner
whole body
terrain.
approach.
So
And
why
this is what I feel
this is a really
this
powerful
tool, this
scan
scan,
is it
can offer
allows us
us
then to
as
see an overview in the report,
facilitators.
asking better
So it's
questions,
about from receiving
connecting the
information,
client with
like
the
using
experiences
AO
across
scan
both the
as an
body, emotions,
education
and
tool
energy.
that can
And
help
this is
us
really
kind of
powerful, I think,
really
especially for some medicinal
provide
or
more
therapeutic
context or look at
facilitators, where
different things that
often
we
they want
may
to
or may
support
not
the
have
client
considered,
and they're
and
helping them with the lens of the body, but they
inquiry-based
don't know how to give the
questioning, and
support from
then
an
giving
emotional
personalised
terrain.
support
So
out
this
of
can be a
session
valuable tool for that.
for the client, or we
Identifying
could
patterns
even
is like
offer
key
as
in this
a
that we
session
might otherwise
itself,
miss. And
providing a bit of sound
then we can
therapy
send
in
selected
relation
or
to it.
individualized
Now, inner
sound
voice is actually
frequency to
utilizing
support
our
our
voice,
client
and it
out of
actually
session,
is
and even
connecting with,
utilize
I
those
guess, the
sound
subconscious
therapy
terrain,
in
and through
session
our
with
pitch,
clients.
it will
And
tell
we can
where
support clients
imbalances
to shift
are, and
states
looking at
and continue
causes,
integration
vitals,
outside
and
of the
particularly
therapy room. And you'll hear
around
me talk
if you're
about
into
over
color
and over
therapy
again
or
integration, because I
sound
feel like this is
therapy.
the whole
It's
point
really
of
clearly
having
showing
such an
which
amazing tool
notes
such as the
are
AO
in
device, because
alignment and which
you know
are
what
out of
really goes
alignment.
out of session
So
is really what's
I'm going
paramount,
to
because
just
it's
show
what they
you
do
this for a
in their own
moment.
inner terrain.
So
What
you've got
skills
two
are they
options where
developing?
you
How are
can
they
just record, but
applying
record with
these
the scan is
protocols,
really
or
powerful
how are
because
they
it's
then,
going
after
to
they've released certain emotions or had
scan
energy
you
work,
and your
how are
vitals
they
and
then
everything. And you can
keeping
either
those
play harmonics or
boundaries, or
tonal.
how are they
You've got
supporting
balancing. So
their
I'm just
whole
going to show
nervous
you, this
system,
was my
etc.?
last report. And so it gives you the three top high, what's in high and what is the most suppressed. So C. So you can custom the playlist where you're only sending your client perhaps the most, to balance the most dominant, or you can do an overall balance, or you can target particularly the most suppressed on there. Now, I'm just going to show you what will happen is you'll get this summary. It shows our voice levels, and you'll see where the lowest levels are there. But then I like today, this is my own personal scan, but lots going on in my world today. And so having a look at these key kind of emotional things. So if you think along the lines, if you're a kinesiologist, particularly, this is an area where, you can then do some muscle testing, like knowing where to go for more information on myself, who I do emotion code technique, I do somatic therapy, I do regression work and limiting beliefs, etc., and somatic tapping, having a look then, okay, we've got these key areas, we can create scripts, we can create affirmations, so it's helping us do that. Now, how would it support a therapist, a therapeutic therapist? Is often as nutritionists and naturopath, we realize that it's not just the physical, it's the emotional, and we don't often know how to support the client if we haven't been trained in emotional coaching or support. And this is giving a little bit of insights, and then you can then have a look, if you look at your meridians or your chakras, you can actually see like what areas of the body correlate. So this is maybe then looking at what areas we need to observe in the body as well. But if we go into each one of these, if you like doing color therapy, it has this. It gives a bit of information on why it's chosen this color. And then it talks about different emotions. Now here, it's got some vitals. Now, we're not saying, we could again do muscle testing if we were a therapeutic practitioner. We might be looking at certain results that we have with a client, or wondering what type of test to run. It might, when we look at patterns, we don't ever look at the inner voice, particularly potential causes and vitals or imbalances, without seeing it on a regular pattern, not as a one off, because energy always changes and always shifts. And so when we see things that surface repeatedly and aren't clearing or optimizing, then we're knowing, okay, we need to address that more. So, vitals are a starting point to what's happening around the body, emotional patterns. Again, this is looking at themes and what areas need attention. And so this is really powerful when we come to finding origin, or inviting in triggers when we do somatic work, possible causes. We can do deeper inquiry. We might then know how to ask other questions of our client based on this information. And so, how we would use this as a facilitator is scanning, noticing, and observing with curiosity, and then doing inquiring, support, and rescanning. So, asking more specific, tailored questioning, we can see the overall body, emotions, and energy. We can identify patterns that we might have, missed otherwise. We can then actually, as I said, we can play this sound therapy. But again, here's the little envelope, so you can send this as part of in between session for the client to do as a form of integration work there. So I would definitely, from a nutrition standpoint and lifestyle, just looking at those patterns and personalizing frequency. Kinesiology, what a great way to knowing what to muscle test, and then being able to give tailored targeted frequency. And then myself as a somatic therapist, it's a really good starting point, as far as, and also providing some integration between sessions there. Now, I'm really excited to share this particular scan option. It was the first one that I personally was introduced to, and it was why I felt empowered and thought this is such a valuable tool for facilitators and practitioners. So, most who have maybe followed me know that I look at wellness from a whole body approach, and this is what I feel this tool, this scan, can offer us as facilitators. So, it's about from receiving information, like using AO scan as an education tool that can help us kind of really provide more context or look at different things that we may or may not have considered, and inquiry based questioning, and then giving personalized support out of session for the client. Or we could even offer as a session itself, providing a bit of sound therapy in relation to it. Now, inner voice is actually utilizing our voice, and it actually is connecting with, I guess, the subconscious terrain, and through our pitch, it will tell where imbalances are, and looking at possible causes, vitals, and particularly around if you're into color therapy or sound therapy, it's really clearly showing which notes are in alignment and which are out of alignment. So I'm going to just show you this for a moment. So you've got two options where you can just record, but record with the scan is really powerful because it's going to scan you and your vitals and everything. And you can either play harmonics or tonal. You've got balancing. So I'm just
So it's all about bridging the conscious, the mind, and the inner terrain, the subconscious. And we're looking at doing this before a therapy, during the journey, and after therapy. So
if we're just taking inner voice for an example, it's about what if we could listen to the inner conversation shaping the client's experience. And we could do this in the session. We could even have this as an additional service that you offer. So if you're depending on how you're pricing, or in complementary in a session or part of the package, or you could even potentially, with some people, have this as a separate standalone, but you could do it not only in the session but out of session. So because it is a remote scan that you can do, if your client sends you prior to a session a voice recording, you can run the report, so you can go through the report in session. So when we run a report, we notice themes, we muscle test, if that's something that you do, or sway test. When we notice themes, even from a therapeutic point of view, you would be then looking at, okay, I'm going to maybe do these blood works, or I'm going to run these tests. And we're noticing emotional and body responses, and then giving targeted or personalized beliefs. So that basically after session, it's all about integration. We've sent through the sound frequencies so that they can utilize those in between the sessions, so that therapy isn't finished when the client walks out. This is so important. So often, especially in emotional work or release work, somatic work, we leave a client, they might have come to some awareness or acknowledgement or release something, but what are they taking away? What have we equipped them with? In between those sessions, how are they knowing how to organically, start doing those lifestyle or those protocols if you're a nutritionist or a naturopath? So this is where change is strengthened. And the greatest shift often happens not through the breakthroughs in our sessions, but in what follows. So, ways that AO can support: personalized playlists, send frequencies, help create rituals or routines, sleep support, stress, and nervous system regulation, giving client awareness, noticing patterns, being able to have tangible evidence of seeing when they're making those micro, changes, and those, especially in some of the work we do, often, clients want to see results. Sometimes they feel overwhelmed, and it keeps them pursuing more when they can slightly see those changes that are going on. Affirmations, again, patterning is really, really keen. Whole body support, support out of session. So why does integration matter so much? The subconscious continues processing after a session. The nervous system needs support as new patterns are created, and the body benefits from repeated reminders of safety and balance there. And personalized frequency tools support the client in their day-to-day. So from an AO scan integration journey, it's about in session, it's about using possibly mind sync out of session. It's about creating support out of session with, or in session with, those playlists. The client then know how to journal, how to reflect, how to track. Then they might have some of that embodied integration happening inwardly, and then doing a follow-up scan. And then if we look at from a facilitator journey, how do we see it for ourselves that we can utilize the AO scan for ourselves as the facilitator? We could scan ourselves, we could clear our energy, we can shield and protect and create those boundaries. It can help us prepare better for our sessions with our clients. It can help us reset and release, and it can also help us track our own patterns. So, if you're ready to integrate an AO scan into your practice, book a complimentary discovery chat and see how you can eh, see how it works with your own personal modality, knowing what tools in the AO scan is best suiting to your practice. And if you've got any questions around pricing or access or how to get started. So, if you're ready to experience the AO scan, Experience it for yourself, for your family, for your own loved ones, or integrate it into your session, or offer it as standalone, or simply you're like me and you're wanting to support the client journey more. And the cost of the AO scan is $149 a month. It's a subscription base, and this is the starting point for that. Like, there's only this cost, but if you're wanting to then refer, that's additional cost for that. But if you're just having it solely for your practice, it's $149 US. And if you think about it as a tax deduction, and seriously, in no time at all, especially if you're doing it as standalone or adding it as additional services, it will pay for itself. And the result and that quality of client journey that you're giving will even amplify your business even more. So you'll see 2 QR codes here. One is if you're wanting to book in and chat more, or one that you're really ready and you're thinking, yes, I'm in, I'm wanting to actually take the next step for an AO scan. So thanks very much for listening and learning more. And maybe even if you're not quite ready for the AO scan, maybe we've given you some gentle reminders of the importance of integration work, the importance of client journey, not just our modality itself.